I like rereading books, and I cannot lie. Hello, welcome to my channel, Another Bibliophile Reads. My name is Greg, and this is not strictly the first video on this subject, because I have talked about my love of rereading a number of times. And I have decided to set myself off on a rather ambitious project to reread a lot of not necessarily my favorite books of all times, but books that I'm curious about revisiting. And this will be the first video in a series. This is going to be about science fiction books. I will follow it up for general fiction, horror, and then mystery and suspense books. So, I started reading science fiction really rather early, around 6th grade, and you will see a few of those old-timey books pop up in this list. But what I'm doing here is I have selected 12 science fiction novels that for whatever reason I want to reread. Some of them I've only read once. Some of them I've read multiple times before. And these are not necessarily my selection for the greatest science fiction books ever written, although some of them would definitely count in that category. So I'm going to list off the 12 books that I want to reread. I'm kind of thinking of rereading them in publication order, but for a number of reasons, I don't think that's going to be a reality. I'm probably going to have to pick out some out of order. So, what books are on my rereading list? I will have to apologize because I have them written down on my laptop over there, so I will be reading from that list. And the first book is The Shrinking Man by Richard Matheson, originally published in 1957. I think I've read this 2, maybe 3 times before, and it's gotten better each time I've read it. It is the story of a man who gets lost in a mysterious fog, and then he starts shrinking. I don't remember the exact detail. I think it's like 1/8 of an inch or maybe 1/6 of an inch, and he shrinks by that amount every day, regularly. So I don't remember how tall he is in the book, but he can calculate when he's going to run out of time and that he will eventually shrink into nothing. And part of this book is told of him experiencing the shrinking when he's relatively normal sized. And the other alternating chapters is when he's really tiny. He is trapped in his basement. His wife has left. No one is left in the house. And in this basement is a spider. And he is the size of an insect. And this spider wants to eat him. And honestly, this is one of the greatest battles in all of science fiction. This tiny little man having to defend himself against a spider. Next, I want to read Solaris by Stanislaw Lem, originally published in Polish and published in 1961. This is the story of an astronaut circling a space station around a rather unique alien planet. There are not many people on this space station. If I remember correctly, he is one of 4. But maybe not, because this alien planet has a very alien intelligence that is trying to communicate with the astronauts. And the way it communicates is by reproducing people from their memories. And this astronaut goes to the space station, and his wife, that has been dead for a number of years, seems to be alive again. This creature has all the memories this man has of his wife, and it is able to learn and become something new. It is one of the great science fiction novels about alien intelligence and how you communicate with alien intelligence. Now, as I said before, this book is originally published in Polish, and there are 2 versions available. This is the bad version of Solaris. It was translated from the French. So the English translators just picked up a French translation of the Polish and published it. Stanislaw Lem, who could read and understand English perfectly well, commented that this is a terrible translation. The translation you want to go for is, as of now, only available in audiobook or a digital book due to copyright issues, and it was translated by Bill Johnson. Do yourself a favor and read the ebook or listen to the audiobook that was translated directly from the Polish. I want to read The Blue World by Jack Vance, originally published in 1966. This is the first adult science fiction novel that I ever read. I was in 6th grade. This is not my original copy, but my school teacher was not all that thrilled that I was reading adult science fiction. But this is the story of a distant planet with humans on it. They have essentially lost most of their technology. It is a watery world, and they essentially live on an island of floating seaweed. But also on this planet are sea monsters, and it is the story of a man who has to fight the monster of all sea monsters. I'll see how much I like it again after so many years. Roadside Picnic by Akady and Boris Strugatsky, originally translated from the Russian and published in 1972. This was the height of the Soviet Union, and these authors were under some restrictions. But this is the story of aliens who essentially visited Earth and had a big-ass party and left all sorts of trash behind. But this trash is thousands and thousands of years of advanced technology. And people like collecting this alien trash. It can do marvelous things. Really fascinating science fiction story, and even more fascinating considering this came out of the repressive Soviet Union. The Book of Skulls by Robert Silverberg, originally published in 1972. 4 university students in New York City. One of them discovers a reference to a cult somewhere out in the Southwest that supposedly can grant immortality. But you have to apply to this cult in groups of 4. And in order to gain admittance to this cult, one of the 4 must commit suicide, and one of the 4 must be murdered. This is a book told in alternating narratives. Each of the 4 characters gets to narrate their story. But what's even more fascinating by this is that Robert Silverberg is one of the greatest science fiction novelists who ever lived. But maybe this book is not science fiction, or maybe it is. You'll just have to read the book to discover why. The Mote in God's Eye by Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle, published in 1974. When I was a high school student in the early 80s, this was known as one of the hardest science fiction books they could pick up. Scientifically accurate, as it was determined back then, and just very complicated. It is the story of humanity who encounters their first alien race. And it is how humans and aliens need to communicate. But these aliens might have a secret. Dahlgren by Samuel R. Delany, originally published in 1975. This is a mammoth of a book and extremely complicated. Some people prefer to call this literary fiction and science fiction because it is essentially a very complicated literary work that works with time and narrative. The first sentence of this book is a sentence fragment. It is the last half of a sentence. The book ends with the first half of the sentence. If you are familiar with that, it comes from James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake. I tried reading it in high school and could not get through it. It was a little too complicated for my high school mind. It also has some really graphic homosexual scenes in this book and graphic heterosexual scenes. So just a little too complicated for a high schooler. When I finally reread it in college, I loved it. It would certainly be in my top 10 of science fiction novels. A Scanner Darkly by Philip K. Dick from 1977. This is a novel that I have only read once. I really like Philip K. Dick novels. My favorite is probably Valis, but for this project, I wanted to pick out a book that I have only read once. It is the story of an undercover drug agent, and he is searching for a drug dealer. But with Philip K. Dick, you never know what's real because the detective and the drug dealer just might be the same person. Midnight at the Well of Souls by Jack L. Chalker. I read this in high school and was totally blown away by it. It would probably not be considered one of the greatest science fiction novels of all time. It's rather cheesy but highly entertaining. It is the story of a space freighter captain who is taking some passengers, and they happen to be waylaid by a planet. And this planet is a giant computer. And when it captures you, it puts you through its machine and recreates you as one of the intelligent alien races in the universe. Because this computer has all intelligent aliens represented on its planet in hexes, and you do not know what alien race you will come out. So I believe there's 5 characters, and essentially they all will come out as a different kind of alien, and it follows all of their stories. I think it's going to be a fun reread. Hyperion by Dan Simmons from 1989. This is almost always considered in the top 5 of science fiction novels. It is sort of a retelling of the Canterbury Tales of pilgrims going to an alien planet to meet a dreaded beast called the Shrike, because the Shrike can kill you or grant you something special. And each of the narrators wants something special from this Shrike. And some of the stories are just heartbreaking. And Diaspora by Greg Egan, 1997. Greg Egan is a scientist out of Australia, and he wants to make sure that the science in his books is as accurate as possible. So how do you discuss a spacefaring humanity with the speed of light? Well, in his world is that you do not travel in a physical form. You copy your brain into a computer and send that computer robotic body out into space. So if the planet is 750 light years away, it may take you over 1,000 years to get to your destination. And everyone that you knew back on planet Earth is going to be dead, unless they're a computer themselves. And I think that is such a fascinating idea. House of Suns by Alastair Reynolds from 2008. in the far future, a woman copies herself into clones and downloads her mind into each of these clones. Theoretically, each of these clones is immortal, and they disperse across the universe. But they promise to gather, I think it's every 1,000 years, to discuss what they have seen in the universe. And as these 1,000 years go by, the original person changes over time. And this is about like their 10,000th reunion, maybe it's even more, because they have existed for tens of thousands of years. They comment on space empires that have risen and fallen and have been completely forgotten. But in the time of this book, something or someone is murdering these clones, and they have to find out who is out to kill them. Okay, those are my science fiction novels that I plan to read. The plan is roughly one a month, one maybe every other month, something that I can hopefully finish in 2025, especially if I get started a little bit in 2024. And those are my plans for science fiction. Thank you for watching, and keep on reading.